Winners win. I'm a winner. We're going to win.
Gators Breakdown. Because there's never a dull moment in Gator Nation.
The Gators Breakdown podcast is ready to go. I'm your host, David Waters. You can find me on X at GatorDave_GB, coming at you with another episode of Gators Breakdown, a little bit different of an episode right here of Gators Breakdown, and get a new running back coach to talk about. John Summerall completing his staff. We'll get into that. And then I'm going to take all the Buster Faulkner preview and review and in-depth deep dives that we had last week with Will Miles and Seth Varnador. Going to put that together for an episode just by itself. If you missed that last week, or if you just kind of want to focus in on the offensive coordinator, Buster Faulkner here, you can do it right here with this episode of Gators Breakdown. So didn't really know we'd have news to input on this as far as completing the staff. So we'll get into a little bit about that as far as the running back coach being hired, and then get into the Buster Faulkner content for this episode. So everybody hit that like button, subscribe right here on YouTube. Smash that like button. It really helps us out. Subscribe if you haven't done so yet. Leave some comments as well. What you're thinking about the hires. There we go. Chris Foster from Duke getting hired as the running back coach, and then Buster Faulkner. All the information you're going to get about the new offensive coordinator for the Gators. I'm saying there's a lot of deep dive stuff with him last week. So it's one reason I'm just kind of combining it into, one episode here, just in case you missed it. I'm not trying to, pull the wool over your eyes and, put this out as really a new episode. I'm kind of telling you up front of, what the episode's going to be about. It is what we had last week with Will Miles and Seth Varnador, but trying to just put it all together for an episode for you if you just kind of want the Buster Faulkner content all in one episode. So lots to get into. Before we get there, in a little bit of news, first, as John Summerall completes his Florida Gators coaching staff with the hire of running backs coach Chris Foster from Duke. And according to CBS Sports, Foster, who has been the interest of multiple SEC teams this cycle, has helped Duke running back Nate Shepard rank second in the ACC in rushing yards this season. So I don't know what other SEC programs he was maybe in the running for, but Summerall now, with Tulane season ending this past weekend in the college football playoff, made a slew of hires from Tulane. Of course, worked out well beforehand, of course, because as soon as the game was over, and then on Sunday, those wave of Tulane players coming to Florida, and now on this Monday, get the news of Foster being hired from Duke. So last bit of hire, the last hire here he had to make. So now completes the coaching staff, but he joined the Blue Devil program in January of 2025. So only there a season, and assistant coach, works primarily with Duke running backs. Came to Duke after a 2-year stint at Northwestern in 23 and 24, serving as a running backs coach there. During his time in Evanston, Foster helped the Wildcats to a 14-7 victory against Utah in the Las Vegas Bowl to cap the 2023 campaign. Before his tenure at Northwestern, Foster spent 2 seasons at East Carolina, serving as the recruiting coordinator and running backs coach. In 2022, Pirate running backs rushed for 5.2 yards a carry, second highest total in the AAC that year. ECU running back room was led by Keaton Mitchell, Pro Football Focus All-American honorable mention selection, who ranked second in the country with 7.2 yards per carry. Mitchell rushed for 1,452 yards, which ranked second highest in the conference and 12th in the country. Powered by Foster's rushing attack, the Pirates posted an 8-5 record in 2022, knocked off Coastal Carolina 53-29 in the Birmingham Bowl. In 2021, East Carolina went 7-5, averaged 170.4 yards on the ground. In his initial season with Foster, Mitchell became the first East Carolina running back to average more than 100 yards per game since NFL All-Pro Chris Johnson in 2007. Mitchell ranked 9th in the country with 6.5 yards per carry average. Prior to his time at East Carolina, Foster spent 5 years as the running backs coach, recruiting coordinator, and associate head coach at Georgia Southern, where he mentored future NFL running back Matt Breida. Foster joined the Eagle staff in 2016 and was a running backs coach and was elevated to recruiting coordinator in 2018 before taking on the role of associate head coach in 2019 In his final season at Georgia Southern, the Eagles running backs finished sixth in the country with 267.1 rushing yards per game, combined for 2,427 yards and 17 touchdowns. Foster was a nominee for the Broyles Award, given to the nation's top assistant coach. Now, of course, there at Georgia Southern, you're running the ball close to, 70% of the time. That was back then when Georgia Southern was still a run-heavy option team. Foster made a one-year stop at Maryville in Tennessee college before arriving at Georgia Southern. There, averaged about 250 yards on the ground. And then Foster coached 3 seasons, 2012, 2013, 2014 at Appalachian State, where he developed a trio of all-conference selections and a pair of FCS All-American choices. That's when App State was in the FCS. So with Foster's guidance, Marcus Cox set ASU rookie records with 1,250 rushing yards, 21 total touchdowns, and went out to being named the Southern Conference Freshman of the Year and placing second on the voting for the Jerry Rice Award. That's the Freshman of the Year award in the FCS. That was back in 2013. Started his coaching career at his alma mater, Gardner-Webb, where he led the running backs there as well. So, through all of this, I don't really see a direct connection to Sumrall and or Buster Faulkner, so not really sure how this one came together. Through all the names, of course, we've been hearing the last couple of weeks, Derek Nix ends up at Alabama. Of course, Oregon's running back coach, Rashad Samples, that name was thrown around a little bit. Maybe even Robert Gillespie, the running back, former Gator running back. He's at Alabama as the running backs coach. This is where Sumrall lands for his running back coach. So I went deep diving a little bit since there was a track record there. What does this look like for Chris Foster? And these stats come from Fourth and Short, and not a lot really stands out here. Not a lot really just stands out as just jumping off the page. And I went with success rate in yards per rush for these stats. Not really dominating stats here when you look at it. Nothing, not really going to pretend to know anything beyond this, and definitely why I wanted to look up the stats. I mean, you got this past year at Duke, the success rate was 58th in the country, so not terrible. 44.4% success rate. Yards per rush was 87th in the country. But before Duke, he was at 2 years at Northwestern. Now it's just a terrible Northwestern program, but not a lot to write home about there. Success rates, 100 in the country, basically 106, 121st. Yards per rush was 120th, 126th in his 2 years there at Northwestern, averaging 3.4 yards a carry. There at East Carolina, his success rate, his 2 years there, the highest was the 80th, 19th in yards per rush in 2022. In 2021 there, 104th in success rate at 39.8%, 76th in the country in yards per rush at 4.1. Then, as I mentioned, all those years at Georgia Southern, 2016 to 2020, I mean, that's, like I said, Georgia Southern, they're running the ball 70 to 80% of the time there. So success rate, you can kind of, his last year there, 2020, 39th, that's a COVID year, 39th at 46.1%, 12th in yards per rush. So your yards per rush, most of the time there, was pretty good his last 3 years there. His first 2 years there, not a lot to write home about as far as success rate. 93rd, 95th in the country in 2016, 2017. 68th and 78th in yards per rush with 4.4, 4.1. And these stats go all the way back to 2014. That was his last year at App State, ranked 17th in yards per rush, 38th. I think it was when they made the move to FBS, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere around there for App State. But, I mean, there you go. So, through the years for Chris Foster, moderate success. I mean, like I said, nothing stands out. Nothing jumps off the page when you want to go with some of these advanced stats here of success rate and then yards per rush. So, overall, Foster, the impact as an on-the-field coach probably can be overlooked a bit with Buster Faulkner as offensive coordinator. I think the biggest question is going to be on the recruiting front. What does that look like? Is it something like we see maybe with the guy who just left, Jabbar Jalouk? While the star name didn't really happen, the evaluation was top notch. So we'll have to see if coming to a job like Florida can up the recruiting game and or get good backs in here through evaluation. Biggest recruiting jobs coming up this week, by the way. We're trying to convince Jaden Ball to stay at Florida and not transfer. How's that look with the hire of Foster? Certainly a question. We'll probably find out in a few days. But given the schools he's been at, there's not really a great opportunity of great recruiting results. But I guess we can ask ourselves, why stuck at that level for so long and just now getting his first power program type of job? So on the offensive staff side, I think, there's a lot of potential, but there is a track record here from Foster that just doesn't really stand out. But maybe a move to a place like Florida is what he needs and can bear great results with that logo on his chest, going out and recruiting. Transfer portal evaluations, I think we'll go be far in this as well. So not really a name we were all familiar with coming into this hiring cycle. And then the other names I mentioned a while ago, certainly can make a case for wanting those guys a bit more. We're honed in on those names for a couple of weeks. But Florida ends up with Chris Foster right here, running back coach from Duke. So staff's complete. Staff is complete. Now let's just move forward to the Jaden Ball news this week. More transfer portal comings and goings. Big news, LJ McCray's coming back for the Gators. Wondered about him. Probably on the NIL valuation side, 5-star, former 5-star, probably getting paid a good bit. But now heading into his third season, coming off a year of injury. I think good news for the potential of keeping LJ McCray on the roster. That was the big one. Nashawn Montgomery going to hit the transfer portal at wide receiver for the Gators. So we're talking about potential as well. I like Nashawn Montgomery. I think he'll go on to be pretty good somewhere else. But now going to hit the transfer portal for Florida. Receivers going to be tricky. I think Trey Wilson, Dallas Wilson, Vernell Brown III. Got true freshmen coming in like Davion Gross. I think he can really step on the field pretty early. So we'll see where that goes. But that's kind of the bigger names. Jason Zandamela, I think, who's probably going to be starting at center. Jaden Robinson, guys who have said they're going to be coming back, or they didn't say it, but the reports out there from various sources saying they're coming back now. So you start in center. Jaden Robinson will get a lot of play at linebacker. What does that mean for Aaron Childs at the linebacker spot? I lean him towards staying, but does Jaden Robinson coming back affect that? Is that any indication of what Aaron Childs may think? I don't necessarily think so, but certainly begs the question. So there you go. Getting you caught up on a little bit of news before we get to the Buster Faulkner content. But also, get on the college football playoff action there at MyBookie. It's the second round of the college football playoff. Great time to get in on all the betting action right there at MyBookie. Miami, the lines come down a little bit now. 9.5-point underdogs to Ohio State. Opened up at 10. Oregon currently favored by 2 over Texas Tech. That's come up a point in the last day. And I still think one of the most intriguing, and a lot of people point to Miami and Ohio State. I think that's intriguing too. But for me, Bama and Indiana, I think that's an intriguing matchup. Indiana now favored only by 6.5 over Alabama. And Ole Miss currently 6.5-point dogs to Georgia. They're in the Sugar Bowl. All the bowl games right there at MyBookie. Get in on the NFL action as well. Right there, all under one roof. Game lines, player props, and more. NFL Super Contest, the Survivor Polls. Go bet it all at MyBookie. It's your one-stop sports book and casino all in one. One account, one wallet. You can bet the football and then go spend some time hitting the slots right there on MyBookie. No switch apps. You don't have to jump platforms. Straight up action right there at MyBookie. And if you're new to MyBookie, use our promo code Gators. Get your first bet up to $500 fully covered. If your play doesn't hit, you get it right back with the bet back bonus. No stress, just a one-time rollover. on your return bet so you're free to reload and keep firing. So sign up at mybookie.ag with promo code Gators and go claim your bet back bonus. All right, so going back, main reason for this episode. I wanted to put together the Buster Faulkner deep dives and the content from the last week in one episode together. So, like I said, telling you up front a bit so you don't feel like you're duped or, or anything is new is talked about. It's the separate conversations I had last week with Will Miles and then Seth Farnador and his film review. So if you already listened to those from last week, this is nothing new for you, but here it is all together. So to add a little new before we get into that part, Scott Carter, the Gators official writer there at FloridaGators.com, released an article on Monday where he got to talk to Faulkner, and since he's taken the job and the Florida job, and there's some takeaways there. Part of the article, quote, in Faulkner's first season with the Gators, there will be a new starting quarterback. Sophomore DJ Lagway announced his plans to enter the transfer portal last week. Faulkner has a vision for who he wants as Florida's starting quarterback. Quote, it all starts with that position, Faulkner said. Regardless of the skill set, you've got to be the toughest guy in the building. You've got to be the most mentally tough guy on the football team because of the way college football is right now. Regardless of skill set, that is non-negotiable for me. And if they're that, then it will feed through this program. I don't get caught up in the hype about where a guy played or how many stars he was. I want the best, toughest kid for this program that's going to ultimately lead to success, just because of the way they are wired. And I think that's getting lost in college football a little bit, but it won't get lost with me. End the quote. Now, I don't know if that was a straight shot at Lagway and why he entered the portal, but it at least tells you what Faulkner's looking for. And maybe there was some, the question there about given all the reports last week, that came out about why DJ Lagway transferring from Florida. Going back to the CBS Sports article last week, quote, some raw question what he's about, one source said when talking about DJ Lagway. Lagway's initial meeting with the new Florida staff did not go well, per multiple sources. New Florida head coach John Summerall questioned Lagway as a football player. The new staff opted to challenge the high-priced quarterback, pushing him on his competitiveness and work ethic. That was from the CBS Sports article last week. So pair all that together, and Lagway not hearing what he wanted to hear from the staff about a plan, and you see why we're here. I mean, at least the way it was worded together in the article from Scott Carter of, Lagway's transferring, here's what he's looking for, and then the whole mental toughness part, and then pairing that with what we heard last week about this staff being pretty forthcoming towards DJ Lagway, kind of just testing who he was. Maybe it rubbed both sides the wrong way. I don't know if it was a direct comment about DJ Lagway or if it's just what Buster Faulkner is just generally looking for. But certainly seems like to me there's can be some connection there. I don't know when that interview was done. Certainly seems plausible that it was after DJ Lagway hit the transfer portal, so within the last week. And I know a lot of people question it. I mean, I don't really question it about DJ Lagway. I'm not close enough to the situation. I know a lot of people from afar will say the way he looked on the sideline, the way he looked in games, maybe disinterested, maybe didn't attack everything the right way. I don't know. I didn't hear anything like that. But I don't know where the mindset was after the season. And then the previous staff getting fired. Now, there was the reports, in those same reports that Lagway wanted to stay at Florida. But maybe there's certain buttons this new staff wants to push, rightfully so, for the most important position on the field, and they didn't get the feedback they wanted. And maybe Lagway's didn't either. And it's fine. Go your separate ways. No harm, no foul. Now, he can go play great somewhere else, and we'll see what that means for Florida. It would sting in some ways, but not so much if whoever you decided to play here in Gainesville goes out there and does their thing at a high level. I won't really care what DJ Lagway's doing, as long as the guy here is doing great things as well. Or maybe it didn't. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe they just didn't see it as a fit either way. Also, from the Scott Carter interview, there was a Q&A session there, and the question: How do you describe your style as a play caller? And Buster Faulkner said, "We've kind of built this thing and morphed into something very unique. It's a pro-style hybrid offense. Is really the best way to say it. You'll see a lot of the pro game." Right? Because it's our job to get these kids to the next level, and they all want to play in the NFL. I want them to be ready to play in the NFL when they walk into a locker room. And it's also a mixture of a lot of things you see across college football and high school football. I think we have been able to mesh the two over the last 3 to 4 years. We want to create matchups, get the ball in space to our playmakers, however that looks, whether it's down the field, perimeter screens, or being highly involved in the run game. We really pride ourselves on trying to be the most versatile offense in the country. So, look, guys, I definitely recommend. There's some other good nuggets in there. Go to FloridaGators.com. Check out the great work from Scott Carter there. Big fan of Scott. So, there you go. I suggest you go read it. There's a lot in there about styles of offense that at Georgia Tech and how he's going to relate that to Florida. I don't want to steal all the thunder from the article. But since we were talking Buster Faulkner and that got released today, certainly wanted to connect it a little bit and put some more spotlight on it because it's a really good article, really good read there from Scott Carter. So here we go. For even more on Buster Faulkner, here's the recent coverage and insight on him from recent episodes of Gators Breakdown. Well, the executive summary on Buster Faulkner is a proven offensive transformer who excels at building programs from the ground up. His Georgia Tech tenure from 2023 to 2025 showcases one of the most dramatic multi-year turnarounds in recent FBS history, inheriting the 129th offense and transforming it into number 19 by year 3. His consistent performance, despite working with talent-deficient rosters, demonstrates elite coaching ability. The key pattern: strong year 1 transformations, potential year 2 volatility. But, oh, Lord, I can't say that word. I don't know why that word trips me up every freaking time. Volatility. Jesus, there. I don't know why it took me. I had to just stop there. In surge metrics, peak performance in year 3 plus. So, it's, I think, really screams for what we want here at Florida. I mean, you get a strong year 1 transformation. Hopefully, year 2 is not a fall off, but and you can keep it going. But it's exactly, if you were to take the name away and have to write a summary of who you want the next offensive coordinator to be, you would like it to read like this.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing that I like is that he's been doing this with talent deficient rosters, right? And so you look at that and say, okay, now there's a double-edged sword there, right? Which is that he has not recruited his way to having better offenses at Georgia Tech. He schemed his way to having better offenses at Georgia Tech. And I think that's, and some of these other stops. And so, this is fundamentally, I think, where it makes sense that Faulkner as the offensive coordinator can get people excited. Because if you think about it, like, what's the difference between Urban Meyer and Dan Mullen? Like, from an offensive perspective, I'm not sure they're that different. And in fact, I think Mullen was probably more of a tactician than Urban Meyer is. I mean, Urban Meyer developed the offense and all that sort of stuff. But really, when it comes down to it, if you think about it, like, Meyer was responsible for special teams and sort of delegated what was going to happen to the Florida offense. But there's also all those stories out there about how Tim Tebow almost went to Alabama because he really didn't like Dan Mullen all that much. And so Urban Meyer certainly had a role to play when it came to bringing guys in. to excel in that team. And so that's going to be the question, right? Is how do you delegate the different roles for all these guys? And one of the benefits for Sumrall is that he's going to be able to delegate it all to Faulkner because he's a defensive coach by training, right? Um, so there should be. We just got done talking about Florida having equivalent or having how much talent does Florida really have? I think we're going to see, right? I mean, even if you figure that Florida is sort of, even if you suppose that Florida's going to have an exodus of talent, and even if you look at Florida and go, were they really as good as the recruiting rankings and all that stuff say? I still think that this is a top 25 talented team and certainly a more talented team than Georgia Tech. And so that's the thing that jumps out to me is the career minus 3.4 roster talent differential that demonstrates elite coaching ability. Now, and I've said this a couple of weeks now, but I went and looked. Charlie Weiss came in the Will Muschamp regime with Tom Brady on his resume and a really good offense at Kansas City with Matt Castle at quarterback and years with Brady Quinn at Notre Dame. Now, obviously that went downhill on the back end, but you could blame that on recruiting. You could blame that on program management, not necessarily on his ability as an offensive coordinator. And if you looked at Weiss's background and said, you said take Faulkner's name off of this list, I'd be interested in Matrix Analytical's ranking of Charlie Weiss back when he was hired by Florida's the offensive coordinator. I think it would have really looked good, right? I think we would have sat there and been like multiple Super Bowl championships, tutored Tom Brady from a raw Michigan six round pick, was able to win, was a effective offensive coordinator with the Jets before he went to the Patriots, went to Notre Dame, struggled as a head coach, but when he had elite quarterback play, was able to coax elite quarterback play out of Brady Quinn. Then he goes to Kansas City after the trade for Matt Castle and realized, Castle's kind of so all of which to say that this is great. And I do think that Faulkner is a home run hire when you look at everything in terms of who the other folks are that Florida could have brought in. But at the same time, like nothing's a home run hire. And nothing's a home run hire when it comes to head coach. Nothing's a home run hire when it comes to your coordinators. And so, that's great that, year one, there were transformations. By the time you got to year three, you've got really good PPAs at a stop like Georgia Tech. All that matters is, can you do it again?
Yeah,
right.
Yep.
And if Faulkner wants to be a head coach, he's going to have to do it again. So the good news is I think there's plenty of motivation to do it again. We said this a few times as Florida was cycling through defensive coordinators, that if one of these guys could actually turn this around, like that guy would be seen as the savior. I think it's the same thing on the offensive side of the ball for Florida at this point. If Sumrall, Faulkner comes in and plays really well and coaches really well, and we see elite quarterback play and elite offensive play, he ain't going to be around Florida very often, and I will take it.
For sure. If he's not here long, it's probably a good reason why. So evaluation summary strengths, going back to it, your elite year one transformer, then a balanced attack by year three peak performance, and that's what you're getting at a Georgia Tech this year. A surge momentum builder, and I think that I had to go and was asked a little bit about surge and talked to Dave about that, and he's like, it's a new analytic he's playing around with because it talks about offensive momentum, and he likes he likes using that right now and works with less talent. You just talked about that. Concerns would be rush PPA regression in year two, the 1 year stop history, of course, the Arkansas State Southern Miss were single year tenures. So durability at some stops are unclear since Georgia Tech is the longest window we have here, and limited P5 experience pre-Georgia Tech. Most stops were the G5 programs. Georgia Tech, his first extended P5 tenure. So bottom line, Buster Faulkner is one of college football's premier offensive rebuilders. His Georgia Tech transformation demonstrates elite program building ability. By year three, he produced an elite offense in both passing and rushing efficiency. Key pattern: expect strong year one improvement, potential year two surge volatility during system optimization, and peak performance by year three. His offense PPA consistently improves each year, even when surge metrics fluctuate. ideal fit. Program seeking dramatic offensive turnarounds, willing to commit a 3+ year timeline, works exceptionally well with less talented rosters and develops balanced, efficient attacks. So there you go. There you go. Brought you on here to talk Buster Faulkner offense. And everybody, one more time, Varnador Films on YouTube. Go check it out. As Seth said, about an hour and 45-minute deep dive into Buster Faulkner offense, Arkansas State, Southern Miss, Georgia Tech, all of it, looked at right there by Seth, and from so many angles too. That's what I liked about it, Seth. I didn't know your format going into it, and I was like, with the run, pass, formations, how he uses all that stuff. I mean, a really, really, really good look, multifaceted look there. One thing to get this started, how much familiarity did you have with Buster Faulkner, maybe following what he was doing before word came out that Florida was interested in him?
So I got, I've actually been back into coaching the last couple of years. So he's a guy that, is really popular in coaching circles for what he's done at Georgia Tech. So I watched kind of starting when he really came on my radar. What's funny, initially, the first time I don't even remember this, but I didn't remember at first. The first time he ever came on my radar, a guy I was coaching with at Tusculum was good buddies with him. And he said, "Oh, yeah, my buddy Buster's the OC at Arkansas State." I was like, "Okay, cool." And the name Buster just stuck in my mind. So when he was at Georgia, I was like, "Oh, it's got to be the same guy." But the game against Florida State and Ireland, I think, is when he really came on my radar.
That was mine as well.
And you're kind of watching the things they do and shifting and the motions and all that kind of stuff in the run game. And so that kind of was like, oh, this is something I need to keep watching because they do a lot of fun stuff, a lot of good stuff, especially in the run game. And so I've been kind of watching in the last couple of years here and there. If their game's on TV, sometimes I'll jump on it and watch it just because I do enjoy kind of seeing how he schemes things up. And then going back through his history was really interesting because I knew he was at Arkansas State just from that one guy's comment, but I didn't really know kind of his whole history. So it was kind of interesting to go back through and kind of get his initial background and then kind of try to find old TV copies of games from back in his Arkansas State days and go through some older stats and things like that and kind of see his career. So he's been a really fun guy to study. But yeah, I've been kind of cognizant of him really the last couple of seasons, and it really started with that game against Florida State and Ireland.
That was the first time I kind of got the feel too, because that was the week 0 game. So it was the only game, kicking off college football that day, or not in that time slot, because Hawaii always kicks off week 0 for all that stuff. But I remember that game, and I was like, oh man, this whole misdirection, and now we didn't know how bad Florida State was going to be at the time.
And everyone said Florida State had the best D line in the country,
right,
and
right.
It was,
there was a report on game day that morning from Pete Thamel, I think. Oh yeah, Florida State's got 3-4 guys from this defensive front that's going to be craved by the NFL scouts. And they got confused and abused by Georgia Tech that game. So that was the first time too. And like you said, I would find myself watching them because I enjoyed what I saw that day. And when they would be on TV and Florida not playing at the same time, I would check in the Georgia Tech games. So I remember when your video came out last week, and then it was posted in the Gators Breakdown Plus channel. And what you had to say here was, quote, initial thoughts are that he is flexible schematically and does a ton of things that defenses don't like going against.
Yeah.
Motions, shift, bunches, 4 strong, tempo, etc. It was somewhat exhausting to chart, really, you said.
Yeah. I got to thank John Summerall for taking so long to make it official, because if he would have made it official when it first came out, I would not have had anywhere near enough time to get that video out. So him taking his time helped me get out the same day. Yeah.
But also that the hire happened, so you didn't waste a whole lot of time.
that was the other part. I almost texted you, is this because there was some thought late in the process that he was going somewhere else, and I'm like, man, I've been charting this for like 6 hours, so I should maybe ask Dave if this is going to happen before I go into the 10th hour here of cutting this together. So it was because every play just about. You got to decide, am I going to chart the initial formation or the formation they end up? Am I going to chart the motion? Am I going to chart the shift? And if you're just like, I kind of decided I'm going to chart the formation they end up in and the motion, but it was just formation, motion, play. And then you got to go back and look at, all right, so who pulled? Is this power read? Is this counter? Is this? So it was just, and you start thinking through that. And I'm kind of doing it leisurely over a few days. You know, some poor schmuck GA's got to do this in a couple hours, you know, after a game. So it's kind of, you know, and then all the thing, like I said, there's a ton of stuff they do that's just,
well,
you know,
to finish
finish
your quote, finish your quote from there, puts a lot on defenses mentally.
Yes.
And then will be interesting to see which way he wants to go at quarterback. Well, we got that storyline this week, so we'll get into that a little bit. But there was a reply from that Joshua dude there in that, and he asked a really good question. Is there any reason for concern that it puts too much on the quarterback to be ready for all of that? So it begs the question, of course, how fast this, you know, it seemed like a complex offense. But at the same time, I know I forwarded you the article that we talked about earlier this week from the Matrix Analytical guys and David Bartu. So big thanks for him. And his analysis showed, hey, this in year one could, you know, really expand the passing game. Yeah. And the passing game can really hit year one. So in what you have seen and paired with that article that's been out there, and then that question that was asked, is there a lot on the quarterback? Because I remember that about Napier's offense. It seemed like there is a ton on the quarterback. And is this maybe not the right word or the right way to phrase it, but is this a quote unquote easier offense? And I don't know if that means starting off faster or if that means, you know, you can just keep building throughout the years and it becomes a more complex offense the more you can build on it.
Yeah, to me, and I haven't seen for sure, but I would guess his passing game is concept based, which a lot of people are, you know. But when you have that, it's kind of, we can run, you know, like he likes to run mesh. Well, you can run mesh. He can run mesh like 15 different ways, but the routes are going to be the same. But it's just how we kind of get to where the guys start from. So I can put him in motion. Now he's the flat guy. I can put this guy in motion, and now he's the shallow guy. So. But for the quarterback, if he calls mesh, I know my reads are here, here, and here. And it doesn't matter where, you know, it doesn't matter kind of how we start, but this is where the guys are going to end up. So, I think a lot of that is just systematic in terms of shifts and motions. Like you got to understand how to run it. But it's not, we've taught high schoolers to shift in motion a ton. It's not something you can't like teach. And if it's, something he's done a lot, I'm sure he's streamlined the teaching of it. Well, one thing I thought he did really well is, that's probably goes towards some of that first season of success is he does kind of scheme up, when he had Philo starting last year, he schemed up a lot of easy throws and easy decisions for him. So a lot of screens, a lot of play action shots where it's kind of a here or there and either or, not super complex. And then you had some things that were more complex in there. But so I think he does a really good job understanding kind of, all right, so what can this guy handle mentally? And then, all right, so how can we build our plan around that? I haven't seen a ton of him, so I can't say that for sure. But it seemed like just watching, if you're going to go watch a backup quarterback get his first start of the year, and you're saying, okay, a ton of screen, a lot of easy throws. Those are easy reads. There's no read. I'm just throwing it there, right? Maybe I could throw a screen to this side or that side, but that's it. And then play action shots where I'm kind of just high-lowing somebody, or it's really kind of I'm taking the shot over the top, or I'm checking it down over here. So a lot of easy. He schemed up a lot of easy decisions for him. So I think he understands how to kind of shape that for his quarterback, like make it easy. And he's a guy that played quarterback in a system that threw the ball a lot. So I think he understands that part of it as well. And that is, I think there is something to that. Where even guys that played quarterback, well, okay, so what kind of system they play in? Yeah. Billy Napier was an option quarterback. So it was very systematic. You start here, they take that away, you move to here, and then you move to there, and you move to there, right? So it's a different way of thinking than somebody I would think. Now, it could be similar in terms of your mindset of we start here, and then we can add these things off of it. But in my experience, option guys are very systematic. Air raid guys can be somewhat systematic, but I think he's been in enough different things where he's shown he's got some creativity as well, and he can kind of tailor it to make it easy in the passing game, because that's where he had to make a lot of his decisions was in the passing game as a player, not so much in the running game. So,
yeah. So let's pair that with the big news of this week, and now with no DJ Lagway, because I'm sure when you started charting this, there was an angle to this where DJ Lagway could be the quarterback.
Yeah.
And now we get the news he's not. Going to move on. You mentioned Aaron Philo, the Georgia Tech backup. He announced he's going into the portal. Seems like he's destined to go to Florida. There's a report out there from Corey Bender earlier on today from Gators Online that Old Dominion quarterback Colton Joseph is in communication with Florida. So quick stats for him. Thrown for about 2,600 yards this past year, 21 touchdowns, adding another 1,000 on the ground with 13 scores on the ground. So kind of in your Haynes King probably for look there. So Seth, with that in mind, and a new quarterback coming in for the Gators, or maybe even Tramel Jones on the roster as well. Game 1 next year, whoever that may be, like what would Florida or what would Buster Faulkner, in your assumption, be looking for in a quarterback right now to get this thing started?
So, it'll be a cop-out answer, but I do think he'll kind of take whoever's the best guy and form it around them. That's kind of what he's done in the past, I think. But to me, watching through, I think the quarterback run element is such a difficult to defend element that it would be a shame if you had to take that all away. So I think the hardest to defend would be if they had a quarterback that could do some of the quarterback run stuff. Now, it doesn't have to be Haynes King, where I'm kind of a human battering ram.
Right.
It could be a little bit different, but that element makes everything so much more difficult to defend. I think if you look at most of the best offenses in the country, they have some element of quarterback run, or at least a threat of quarterback run in them. And I think that's what made the Georgia Tech stuff so unique. Is you had guys, you had good running backs, but you also had speed on the perimeter, and then you had this quarterback that could pull every single time he put the ball in front of him. He could pull it and keep it. You had to account for him, and that makes the running game so much more difficult to defend when you know the quarterback's involved. I mean, we've all heard the number count and box count stuff from even when Mullins took over as the OC at Florida back in the day. Just hey, it's 2 safeties, we should run it, that kind of stuff. But it is true that having that element makes you much more difficult to defend. And with the motion and misdirection and all that kind of stuff in the offense, having the quarterback run element, especially off those motions, is really hard to defend. So if you kind of took that all away, I think he'd still do well because he's done well without it in the past. But I do think it adds something, kind of that cherry on top that makes the offense even more special. So I would, if I was looking for them, I would be trying to find somebody that gave me that element. You need to at least have one guy that can give you that quarterback run element, because I think it is really important. If you're not going to be a really good, which they have done some RPO stuff as well, but if you're not going to be like a heavy RPO team, you need to be a heavy quarterback run team in college football now. And I think the quarterback run stuff is travels a lot better than the RPO stuff. So I think you can do it more often. So.
Yeah, I got J-Bud's numbers up here for the 2025 Georgia Tech play call, and you mentioned RPO. I mean, 22%, to not, like you said, heavy. 11 personnel, 60% of the time. So that goes along with it, too. We'll get into more of that in just a second. But in watching your video, one thing really stuck out to me, and you said it pretty early as well. I'm wondering about the uniqueness of Faulkner, and I think you've hit on it a little bit, though. But in your video, you said he seems to be on the cutting edge of a lot.
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
So going back and looking at Arkansas State stuff, you saw like heavy RPO usage, and it wasn't like it was brand new. But when he was there, it was newer, and it wasn't so ubiquitous as it is now, where you see kind of everybody dabbling in RPO stuff. So he was kind of heavy on that. One big trend recently in the passing game is like 4 guys strong, and one particular concept that people were, Dan Casey was drooling over Will Stein for running the last couple of years was double post with a sail route by number 3 and then the back and the flat. So you have 4 guys kind of on this side of the field. He's been running that as well. A big trend out of the NFL is running some type of concept where you have a flat route and then having your tight end be a lead blocker for the flat route. So again, 4 guys in the pass route. He's been doing that. So you kind of see these things that maybe not trendy, but just new ways of doing things that a lot of the most successful offenses are doing. And I kind of go through and I was seeing those kind of elements in his offense. So, I don't know if he's pioneering these elements, but he sees things, I think, and says, you know what, we could add this. That's a nice wrinkle. We could add it to this or add it to that. And, he's maybe not the guy on the edge that's, the guy on the cutting edge, but he sees these things and it seems like he's trying to constantly adapt, add wrinkles. And when he sees something that makes sense, is sound, but it's really difficult to defend, he seems like he's willing to kind of throw it in and kind of add it to his stuff that he has already and kind of meld his stuff around that to kind of create something really difficult to stop.
So, look, a lot of it, Buster Faulkner sound like a breath of fresh air when you compare it to what Florida just went through.
They're still gonna shift in motion. So I saw some people say, "Thank God we don't have to see motion before we play." Not so fast.
Okay, I did want to ask you about that because I want to take it a step further because where I think a lot of that would eye roll a lot of the fans would be useless motion.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if I think there was something to that in the Napier offense for sure. But
there was. There was. Yeah.
Okay. What advantageous ways does Faulkner use the motions compared to, like, because a lot of people are bringing it up. You're right. In what ways, I guess, does the motion seem to be more advantageous for him than necessarily under a Billy Napier offense?
Well, they use a ton of jet motion, which is the sweep, which Florida does, but I don't know. It seems like it's a little bit more sudden and faster, and he'll use a variety of motions. So he'll bring guys in motion across, and then they'll come back the other way, and they'll bring him across and loop them. He does it a bunch of different ways, and it's especially when you add the quarterback run element, where all right, we're doing the jet motion. Where, if you're defending Florida the last few years with Graham Mertz and an injured DJ Lagway, he's probably not pulling that thing and run it. For the most part, I'm pitching it, or, if I don't pitch it right away, there's some type of play action. So I think he uses it a little bit differently, but, some of the stuff is the same. That's the part that you watch a couple of these things and you're like, uh-oh, that's like they have a red zone concept where they have double crossers. Well, Ricky Pearsall scored on that against South Carolina in 2022. And that was one of Billy's favorite red zone concepts, was that one. So it's the same exact concept, but I'm sure it'll be seen as revolutionary and beautiful now. But, it's just, I think it's just packaged. Everything's packaged a little bit better. And the quarterback run element and the threat of the run game is different. So that can kind of, with the motion and, they do a ton of stuff where, especially with the motion, first of all, it happens fast. It's a lot of jet motion. So it's happening really quickly. So, and they have explosive guys running it. And so they have that jet action going this way. And then they have an actual run action going this way where they're pulling guys the opposite side of the jet motion. So it's just basically bisecting the defense in half. And the defense has to choose, well, am I going with the pulling guard or am I going with the motion? So it's just the run game, I think, in the way it's structured is a little bit different and it fits together a little bit more. And I just think it causes a little bit more confusion. A lot of the Napier motion was, and there's some of this as well at Georgia Tech with Buster, but, information gathering, more kind of pro style where, hey, we're going to put this guy in motion. Is it man? Is it zone? Is it, kind of gather information. There was some jet and some things like that. But, it seems like there's a good bit of motion under Buster that's just like, we're going to make defenses think really quickly and have those guys have to make split seconds decisions, and we can read them. And so they can't be right. So it's a little bit, there's a lot of motion. There's some differences, but there's also some that's the same. And it's just kind of, I think the biggest issue with the last offense was more sequencing, play calling, timing. Conceptually, a lot of stuff was just fine. Everybody runs it. But it just weren't very good at the timing and putting it all together, which I think Buster is really good at.
So also, I hate to keep comparing it to the last staff, but a lot of the personnel groupings and under Napier, the heavy use of two tight ends. Now, of course, not unique to him, but hardly had difference makers at the tight end spot to really warrant that so much. Different stops, different things for Faulkner, showing he's pretty varied in how he even uses the tight ends. 2 tight ends, 1 tight end. If tight end split out wide, and I even go into another one where I think it was a 3 receiver set maybe, but it was the tight end who was the guy on the line and the 2 receivers behind him.
Yeah, they do a bunch. I mean, they're pretty variable in kind of what they do and how they do it. They'll split the tight ends out. They'll play them both in the line. They'll play them both off the line of scrimmage, because both as wings, and have 2 receivers on. They'll play what I like to see is, so you'll see some teams. I remember I went to Dan Mullen's first season at Florida. I think he did a big coaching clinic, and I remember going to the clinic, and I'd just been coaching at Tusculum. I'd been coaching in college, and I was I had to do all the video because I was one of the younger guys on staff. So I had to do all the advanced scouting stuff. So, I'm trying to get insight on, all right, so do you break down when you guys do your advanced scout, is it by personnel grouping? You guys have it ready to go for all of your different personnel groupings. And Brian Johnson was like, we only run 11 personnel. And that's it. And I was like, oh, okay. You're not running anything else. So, and I remember towards the end of Mullen's tenure, you kind of get to where, like, you got 2 running backs that are probably 2 of your best skill guys. Why not go on some 20? Why not put both of them on the field at the same time?
You're talking about like Malik Davis, Damian Pierce together? Yeah,
that would have been cool, right? Yeah. It felt like those 2 would have been cool to see together on the field. And it felt the same with Napier. Okay, so 11 and 12. Why not more 2-back stuff? Why not more, even there are times I think you could have gone 4 receiver stuff. Like, why not a little bit? Why not vary it up a little bit? And it just, this is what we do. We're 11 and 12, it seemed like. So Buster, you go in and you could watch through a game this year and see 12, 20, 21, 10, 11. You could just see a bunch of different things, all within the same game, much less the same season. So I remember charting the 21 Florida team. It was like 96% 11 personnel with Mullen. Yeah. So it was some guys this is what we run. But Buster changes personnel groupings. They had 2 really good running backs, and guess what? They played a lot together at the same time. So I thought that was good to see.
I was a big fan of Haynes. Justice Haynes? I think is his name. Yeah, big fan of him.
Yeah, he's a good player.
Yeah.
Or Jamal Haynes.
Jamal Haynes. Yeah.
Yeah, they had some good skill kids.
Yeah. I mean, and like you said, the way they used them in motions, and it was basically running backs is motioning it out to receivers, or receivers motioning into the backfield, basically essentially being a running back. I remember one play you charted as well, tight end basically as almost a second back. In the backfield.
There was one. I remember there was one where they had 4 receivers and the tight end was the run. I think they might have had actually the running back out playing receiver, and then the tight end was playing running back, and he was the lead blocker. So it was like he'll move guys all over the place. If he knows, all right, I need a guy that's going to block for the quarterback. All right, I'll put the tight end back there. I'll put the receiver, or I'll put the running back out at receiver.
Yeah, I think that's what I liked about it too. You and I, we started this with the Georgia Tech FSU game back, to kick off the 24 season.
Yeah.
Mentioned misdirection, and I guess what it gets me too is the defenses are just constantly guessing, and I think that's what I liked about the offense so far in watching it, especially the Georgia Tech offense recently. But I remember, and I don't even know, I had to go back and watch a lot of Georgia film to see this, but there was a lot of Georgia Tech film in what you broke down.
Yeah, and
we all know Georgia likes to shift that defensive line.
Yeah.
And there was times it even seemed like they were in the middle of that shift and the ball was being snapped with Georgia Tech, because it took them a moment, I think, to realize when they needed to shift, or if it would maybe even take them out of, in a good spot. It was something Georgia does a lot. We've seen it over the years with Kirby Smart's defense, but it did seem like that shift was either late or just because of maybe the guessing game that was going on for their defense.
Yeah, and what that's the other kind of interesting thing. I wrote it down because it was kind of, you go back through and Buster's offenses in terms of like plays per game. There are years at Arkansas State he was 3rd in the country in plays per game. So really, like, I think 2017 he was 3rd in the country. So really fast tempo.
Okay.
18 he was 20th in the country, and then you get to Georgia Tech and they're kind of 73, and they're in the high 70s, 80s. but they have showed tempo at times. And when you combine all that movement with the tempo, it becomes really difficult. I think this is a Gus Malzahn saying. I maybe attribute it to him. It wasn't him, but I know I've heard him say it. There's this football saying, cloudy minds create slow feet. And so when you go really fast and then add all this window dressing, all this motion and things like that onto it, it makes it really difficult for defenses to react quickly. And you don't need a ton of space when you got really good athletes. Like if you're trying to guard, Vernell Brown or Dallas Wilson, and you're a step slow, well, they already, especially Vernell Brown, if you're a linebacker or safety, he might be a step ahead of you already. And if you're a step slower, he's going to be 2 steps ahead of you, right? So, that's I think the most exciting part is if they do bring that tempo element. Which has Florida ever really run tempo?
No.
Which people have been talking about forever. I remember one of the Tebow teams, they said they were going to do it, and then they didn't really. So
no, I mean there was a hit, the hit or miss, maybe coming out the first drive of the game or after halftime, maybe.
Yeah,
and you might see it here or there, but it's never really been a feature of the offense consistently.
It's a weapon. So if they can add that into it with all the athleticism you should be able to have on offense, that's when it becomes a lot of fun and you can become explosive, which I know is one of the issues with Buster the past last year. It seemed like explosiveness.
So that's just because I don't know how crazy this transfer portal and this roster is going to get. I'm going to feel good Vernell Brown III is still part of this roster next year. Like I said, we got answers at quarterback. Going back to earlier this episode, I hope Jaden Ball is part of this offense as well. But there's, of course, obviously some question there. Vernell Brown III, I think the legacy angle, Florida wants to keep him, of course. I think that works out. So I hate to be like this, but might be the only player we know for sure, as skill player-wise, that will be part of this offense. What have you seen in maybe throughout the years, and maybe even Georgia Tech, those are the most recent, that a player like him could fit in? Like we both just discussed about, how they move guys around so much and guys in the backfield and just trying to get the ball in the hands of playmakers. Seem like it's a pretty good fit for him.
Yeah, I think you could look at a guy like Singleton that was there a couple of years ago that had a really good year. He transferred to Auburn, right? Yeah, he ended up transferring to Auburn, and he may end up transferring again. I don't know. But even this year, that Eric Rivers had a pretty good year. He's a smaller, explosive guy. So I think they've done a good job with guys that aren't huge, that are explosive, and finding roles for them, whether getting carries, but a lot of the stuff they do involves shallows, crossers, and then getting those guys in full speed motion before they start their route, or getting them in motion at full speed before they start their route. And a guy like him with his ability to separate, I think, could be really difficult to guard in this kind of offense. So I think they'll definitely find a role for him, especially the way they move guys around. You go back and watch some of the Arkansas State stuff. They had a pretty good slot. I don't know his name, but it was War 14. They'd play him at running back and throw him wheels and stuff out of the backfield, and you'd get where the running back was out at receiver, or they'd look like it's 2 backs, but it's really 1 back, and then him, the receiver, is the other back, and they're throwing it to him, match up on linebackers. So, I think Buster seems to be pretty creative, and he can generate those matchups for those kind of players. So I would anticipate that's what he would do with VB3.
Yeah. Look, that's not any indication out there, everybody. I don't know. I'm hope Dallas Wilson's still in the roster. Nashawn Montgomery, Trey Wilson. I hope the guys are still. But if I had to pick one that I feel really, really good about, that would be VB3 at the receiver spot. So that's just reason I went with that type of question there. So, Seth, man, anything else as we wrap up here, man? The passing game, run game, how it all works together. Buster Faulkner. Like I said, everybody, Seth goes into all this in great detail with great examples of the Arkansas State, mostly Arkansas State and Georgia Tech's offenses. But Seth, man, great job there, man. If there's anything else you want to say about it.
Yeah, if the hour and 47-minute runtime scares you, I did break it up with timestamps, so you can kind of go section by section. I tried to break it down a little bit. Other 2 things that were kind of really stuck out to me. I thought, especially when you could watch the full game. So I was able to watch a couple full games of the All-22. There always seemed to be some type of wrinkle for that particular game. And you could tell it after you watched it a little bit. Okay, this is kind of what this was his wrinkle for that game. So each game seemed to have some type of wrinkle, and then a lot of trick plays too. So not afraid to kind of get do some interesting things in terms of trick plays. And
boy, well, was that a disaster under the last staff? So
yeah, some of them even work. So it'll be a big step up. So yeah, so those were, I thought, I think there's a lot of creativity. It seems like he seems to be bringing a lot of guys from his prior staff to help implement this. So hopefully he can hit the ground running, and it's not just because you've had success previously, it's not a guarantee of future success. We've seen that, but he seems like a guy that's flexible, adjustable, and pretty smart and creative. So I'd imagine he'll figure out a way to move the ball and score points.
In the all game 22, were there a lot of open receivers?
Yeah. Our good friend there at quarterback wasn't. He wasn't. Old Haynes wasn't the best. He missed some throws. He missed even some he'd hit. It would be, if you hit the guy in stride, it's a touchdown. I hold him up. It's a 15-yard gain.
Yeah.
He missed some gimmies too. So, I think there's definitely so some of those numbers where the explosives are down a little bit. Yeah, when you miss a lot of those kind of generated explosives, that can happen too. So, yeah, there's some guys running open.
Okay, good stuff.